Join me in the audio garden to cultivate our collective wisdom, nurture creativity, and spread love. My name is Martha Senator. Welcome to Listen and Be Heard. I'm so glad to be here. I told you last week that I was going to try to make it to Meg Reed's workshop about paths to publishing, which was part of Hub City Publishing's educational program in Spartanburg, South Carolina. And it turned out that I was able to go, and it was packed with information for all kinds of writers. And I'm going to make some time in the audio garden to talk a bit about that. But today, it's already abuzz with anticipation because it's story time. I love story time. It's even more fun sometimes than reading a book on a garden bench because we get to experience it together. Lesley-Ann Brown of Bandit Queen Press is going to tell us a counter story to The Little Mermaid, and I'm so glad that you're here to hear it with me. And after the story, we'll talk a little about it. And Tony Robles has also delivered another basket of fresh spoken word from one of the many reading series here in the Carolinas. And this one, the Juniper Bends Reading Series, happens in Asheville. And it featured several poets on February 16th, who we will hear over the next couple of weeks, Tony among them. He'll be reading from his book, Thrift Store Metamorphosis. But we'll get started with someone whose voice listeners to WPVM in Asheville will recognize as the host of Jazz Hybrid on Tuesdays and Sundays. Sebastian Matthews, reading his poem, The Night Ella Escorted Marilyn Through the Door of the Mocambo. My name is Martha Senator, and this is the Listen and Be Heard Hour for writers and readers.
You heard it wrong. It was Ella, ensconced in the front row all week, not Marilyn. And Ella, who was joined not by Sinatra and Garland, but by Robeson and Horn. And Ella, who had her white friends back, allying for a woman not deemed attractive enough to perform. And it wasn't L.A., but Kansas City or Detroit. And there goes the inevitable Ma Rainey, Bessie Smith, and a young Alberta Hunter, drinks all around the foretop. And Marilyn never stopped being Billie Jean and wasn't strumming that damn ukulele or fake whispering, but belting out a country blues. Here in a brown bob, shirt and collar, stocking boots of her ghosted past. And while we're at it, whites only signs never existed. King's beloved community was baked into the Constitution, and John Lewis never had to walk onto that bridge. Billy clubs flying and sped up reverse back into their holsters. Cops morphing into regular people like us. All sizes and hues and proclivities, heading out to a field full of banquet tables piled high with steaming food, kegs cooling under trees whose limbs had never been asked to bear black bodies, and a band playing some down-home dirty blues, and everyone up dancing and shouting. Now, wouldn't that be something?
Yes, that really would be something. Thank you, Sebastian Matthews, for that poem. Lesley-Ann Brown's voice has journeyed to us all the way from Denmark, where she is about to tell the tale of a mermaid named Mama Wata and a young man who is destined to meet her. Let's listen.
Sorgenfri, a decolonial retelling of Hans Christian Andersen's The Little Mermaid by Lesley-Ann Brown. Movement 1. Water, a treasure of stories, of memories. What stories does she remember? What stories does she tell? Our story begins in the early 18th century with an 11-year-old boy. He arrives in Copenhagen from a small town in the heathlands of Jutland. He is poor, this young boy, his clothes tattered, his wooden shoes too small, his skinny frame tells of too little food, his sunken eyes a deep sorrow. When he was a little boy in Jutland, he worked hard in the fields with his mother. There was very little to eat. One day, as he sits at the shaky wooden table in the crowded room of his home and spies the hard potato he is to eat for lunch, he curses God for this poverty. He curses God for another day of dry breadcrumbs. He curses God that he has no prospects. This is something he will one day come to regret deeply. Although he thinks his God is a certain way, although he believes his God is a man, he will learn that both of these things are wrong. No matter what he does, from pondering the luck of the nobility's wealth to gazing outside the window at the snow-covered fields, nothing seems to alleviate the heavy melancholy that appears to weigh his bones down. He does not know that this melancholy he inherited is tied to the shadow of this nation's wealth. When he arrives in Copenhagen, he is under the care of his uncle, a merchant of the sea. Copenhagen is blessed to have the waters of its harbors on which riches seem to flow. It channels opportunities that those with steely guts can take advantage of. On these harbors, the whole world, with all its blessings and curses, comes, riding the waters, the currents, and the energies of other lands. It is a promising age in Denmark. The harbors are busy with the world coming aboard ships, its stories, fine china, spices, fancy clothes, exotic plants, animals, and even people from lands far and away that this world is only getting to know through the stories and illustrations of a chosen few. There is an opportunity even for poor boys from Jutland, and as ships sail in and out, this young boy is transfixed on these very harbors, his heart pounding with excitement, the bustle of the city, the strangeness of it all, promising him a way out. His uncle wears fine clothes and eats heartily every evening. He wears rings on his fingers and has fancy buckled shoes. He soon discovers his nephew from Jutland is gifted. He can tally numbers and knows how to bargain when he sends him out on errands. When this boy reaches his mid-teens, his uncle, who has come to look favorably upon this nephew, asks him, "Do you want to be as wealthy as me?" This young man would love nothing but. It is all he ever thinks about as he sees his uncle dressed in the finest clothes of the day, going to the theater at Kongens Nytorv, having servants at his beck and call. This young man is weary of poverty, and there is so much wealth in Copenhagen, and he wants a piece of it. Well, his uncle says, this is what you're going to have to do. He winds up his fancy watch that he wears on a chain and keeps in the pocket of his vest. His uncle works for the West Indian Guinea Company, located right here at Knippelsbro, and tells his nephew that he must set sail on the Sornfri from Christianshavn. I need you to go with this ship. Give them a hand. The first stop will be on the west coast of Africa, the Danish Gold Coast, at our fort, Christian Fort. And then you will go to St. Thomas. From there, then you will come home. I need someone I can trust to tell me about this journey. Tell me what comes on, what comes off. For this, I will pay you handsomely." It sounds like an easy enough job. What young man wouldn't want to sail off away from here to see this world that is responsible for so much wealth? He knows that there is something about the trade that includes people, but these are not humans, he is told. They do not have Christian souls. Besides, the uncle reassures him, this brings wealth to us. The young man from Jutland feels a hesitation creep up, and just as he is about to protest, his uncle adds, "I will make it worth your time." There is nothing like the hunger to become rich. For some, the price to pay never seems too high until it is too late. For many, having what once could not be had is enough to inebriate, make your heart beat quickly, and shorten your breath as you move through actions, not fully aware of the misery you enact on others. The ship's skipper, Ole Reinholz, greets the young man as he comes aboard. "You know the way that this ship will sail?" he asks the young man, eager to go to sea on his first adventure and even more, to become rich, just like his uncle. His apprehension has subsided with the thought about how his life will change for the better. He would do anything not to be poor. "Stick with me," the skipper says, "and you will do well." Captain Peter Krog Collin and the crew of Sorn Free set sail on a ship full of Dane guns, gunpowder, and schnapps. It is a warm, calm day as the boat goes out to sea. The ship, built in Christianshavn, is on its second voyage to the slave forts of the Danish Gold Coast in West Africa. To the west coast of Africa, this ship sails, its boat full of a crew of hardened men, already seasoned by the harshness of the sea, the rough hand of 18th century living, and its goods to trade.
This is the Listen and Be Heard Hour for readers and writers. I'm Martha Senator, and we've been listening to Lesley-Ann Brown, publisher of Bandit Queen Press.com. Tell us the first part of the story of Sorn Free, a counter story to The Little Mermaid, in which the mermaid is not little. Lesley-Ann has been leading a writing workshop for counter storytelling that I've had the privilege of participating in, along with some extraordinary women from different parts of the world. But let's listen up. She's about to continue with part 2 of Sorn Free.
Movement 2, Water. Water is memory. Water holds stories. What does this water remember? What story would this water tell? There is a mermaid who comes from Africa. This one is unlike the one that sits lonely in the harbor here. No, this mermaid is big and bold. She would never forsake her world, her voice, for a selfless act of romantic love. No, this mermaid, Mama Wata, is she that brings wealth to these shores. She protects those on ships, sailing with Dane guns, gunpowder, and schnapps. She is beautiful and dark and mysterious. She is our mother who can hold us in her loving care. She can be full of wrath if we cross her. The movement of the water tells us her emotion. If we are good, she provides a safe passage. If we do something to offend her, she will enact her punishment. Mami Wata is the power and wealth behind sea merchants. Whether we are speaking of those on the shores of Africa who at first offer gold for these Dane guns, gunpowder, and snaps, or those who arrive on ships built on shores far away. Mami Wata embraces all of us, favors us, and condemns us, no matter where we are from, because she is one, and we are one. And what we do to each other, we do to ourselves. We know her by many names: Lasren, Yamahaya, Santa Marta la Damodora, and Oshun. It doesn't matter what we call her. These waters, Mama Wata, are mighty. It is from which life comes. She connects us, whether on boats or through rainfall. Water is sacred, water is powerful, and water is essential to our existence. Water washes away the pain. She cleanses, she absorbs, she floods, she calms, she disrupts. Sorn-Free makes it to the west coast of Africa. Our young man is full of wonder at all that he sees, the exotic shores of the vast beaches. The massive fort that he will soon learn contains the sorrow of those considered not to have souls. The waters are calm when the ship docks on this day, and our young sailor is hopeful. At the fort, there is a lawlessness he is not accustomed to. In the evening, they feast not only on food, there is also room for decency here, and he starts to learn the price he must pay for his riches. The goods are exchanged, but they are not for gold this time. There is something the Danes want more. There is no time for conscience here. Mama Wata smiles favorably on these men and the ship. These waters here that we see, where is her beginning? Where is her end? Was this water here at the time of our young hero's adventure? What does this water remember? What could she tell? If we were to be still and listen, what would she say? Mama Wata forgives. She will take it if we give her our worries, shame, and guilt. She forgives, but she will never forget. This ship, Sorn-Free, its name is not meant for the cargo she picks up on this coast. Her name is not for those considered to be without souls by those who barter in their flesh. For our young hero from Jutland, the price he pays is a compromise of his soul. For what does it mean to be human? This is one of the questions his fellow countrymen write books in fancy universities to answer. What does it mean to be human? What does it mean to be free? What is power but might? The ship is full of her cargo, strange fruits that promise to catch large sums in the Danish West Indies, 3 islands meant for extraction, to be used up, its land and her people, strange fruits of women, men, and children. Pregnant women throw themselves overboard, their children swallowed up by Mama Wata. Mama Wata feeds on this sorrow, sucking it like a mango until her belly begins to hurt. Her belly swells with the grief of babies and mothers and the cargo that this strange ship carries across the waters, across her bodies, the groans, the pain, the terror. The crew needs more men. Our young hero struggles with his gut, with his sense of direction, the groans, the stench, the splitting away from his humanity. What is the cost? You will be rich, says the captain to this young man. This is your maiden voyage. This is your lesson. This is how we build our riches, he tells the young man. Mama Wata begins to swell. The ship rises and falls violently on the water. She is unhappy. The terror from the boat is transmitted to her heart. This is not good, but it is not just the cargo she serves on this ship. She is the mother of all. She is the keeper of all, the creator of all, the destroyer of all. When Soarin' Free arrives at St. Croix, 133 of the 150 enslaved souls are unloaded and sugar molasses is loaded. Our young man spends 2 weeks in this tropical terror that is plantation life. The auction blocks, the whips, the disease, the terrorized humans who, if they have survived this tumultuous journey, find themselves at the complete mercy of those who are genuinely without souls. He is filled with melancholy and grief that is difficult for him to name. He knows that he must not speak up against what he has seen to claim his riches. The ship, relieved of her miserable cargo and full of the sweetness that will bring this young man and many others riches, embarks on this trip back home. There is nothing like the homesickness that strikes you out at sea. Without human cargo, the ship is relieved of the distress that threatened to strangle our young hero. It is this shadow of civilization he has difficulty reconciling. He thinks this as he goes out on the deck every evening, studying the stars in the quiet that now befalls the ship. Nothing could prepare you for life at sea. Nothing could prepare you for the horrors of trafficking humans. But suppose this is what his uncle has done to amass his wealth. In that case, he too must bypass his soul, his conscience. Besides, he says to himself, he is not the only one who partakes in this trade on the shores of Africa. He saw what seemed to be everyone partaking, from the local village chiefs to ships that bore flags of lands closer to his home. But a sorrow and a melancholy weigh heavy on his soul. And this is when he sees her under the moonlight, the beautiful and terrifying Mama Wata, her skin a glistening black, her hair dreadlocked and thick, her eyes bluer than the Danish summer skies. And she says to him, "Come to me, and you will be at peace." He squints his eyes and shakes his head in disbelief. He casts his eyes over his shoulder to ensure he is alone. He rubs his eyes, and underneath the moonlight is she, Mama Wata, bobbing on the water, her realm, her tail undeniably that of a fish, her body undeniably that of a woman. "Come to me, and all will be forgiven," she says. "Who are you?" our hero asks, shaken to his core. "I am the one who brings riches to your shores. I am the one who provides the pathways to other lands. I am the one you must drink to quench your thirst. Come to me, and you will be forgiven." The moonlight shimmers on the surface of the deep sea. Our hero shudders in the wake of a draft, and when he looks out to sea, she is gone. There is no one there. It must have been my imagination, he thinks to himself. He makes his way back to his cot, and as Mama Wata rocks the boat gently, he soon finds that he is fast asleep.
This is the Listen and Be Heard Hour for readers and writers, and I'm Martha Senator. Lesley-Ann Brown is the storyteller in the audio garden who has brought us back to the 18th century. I do love story time. I always have. She is telling this story as a counter story to The Little Mermaid in 3 parts. And she's getting ready to share the 3rd part. So let's linger a little while longer in the garden and listen to the end. Song free.
Movement 3. What is the line between dream and reality? What deep dream does our hero fall into that becomes his reality? The dreams of a life full of riches and expensive clothes, of theater and top hats, of carriages and fine dining. Do ships indeed travel on water, or is it some other ethereal medium that carries them across the seas? between lands in the realm of Mama Wata in her capricious care. What is the relationship between water and time? What is the relationship between the past, the present, and the future? Does water abolish time? Does water liberate us? Water creates and she destroys. She is a mermaid who will never trade her world for ours. She knows her power and her energy is in her autonomy. Who are we but mere humans, thinking that our actions have no consequences? Who are we to sully the water, the very substance that our own life has emerged? Mama Wata hears the sorrow and swallows the tears of the 100,000 souls on her back on Danish ships. She sometimes answers the prayers of Danish sea merchants and blesses them with riches. She transforms the sorrow of the enslaved into sweet molasses that we suck on in the form of sweets, and that we bake cookies with in cake. Mama Wata has no favorites, but she hears when you curse God, like our young hero once did in the era of his youth, and what he thinks is a dream is real, as she transmutes the sorrow that she feels in the pit of her stomach into a rage, because God is not a he, it is a she. She never likes it when we get too greedy. Just as Sorgenfrey arrives in the North Sea when she is almost home, a storm begins to rage, and our young hero awakes with a start as his crew members scramble to restore order on the shaky ship. You do not know the terror of impending death if you have not been on a boat that is being tossed about by the power of the seas. What do you think about a ship that has traveled to Africa from Denmark, is loaded with kidnapped human beings from adults to children, makes its way to the Caribbean to sell these human beings, and just as it is about to arrive at its home port, disappears without a trace, never ever to be seen again? Our young hero, he sees her again, in the magnitude of the waves, in the darkness of the storm-stricken skies. He witnesses the blue of her eyes as she approaches, seemingly for an embrace, her skin resembling the people marched to dungeons, thrown overboard, and sold off at auction blocks. Her lips resemble the blood that stained the wood floors of the ship. In her presence, the riches he was promised seem meaningless as everything comes into focus, and the foolishness of our ways confront him, our attachment to the material, and the inability to escape our histories. We give thanks to these waters that brought us so much riches. We honor the souls who remain nameless in the specter of our greed. We acknowledge the sorrow that our joys are sometimes rooted in. Water is memory. She is a storyteller. What does this water remember? What story would this water tell? Thank you, Mama Wata, for life. Thank you to the 100,000 ancestors whose lives were terrorized to bring wealth to Denmark, Norway. Your life has not been in vain. We honor you every single day and with every single breath. The end.
That was Lesley-Ann Brown, author of Black Girl on Mars, journeying across the phone lines under the sea from Denmark to tell us that majestic story of Mama Wata, a large mermaid of African origin. And she's going to talk a little about it with us after this break for Station ID. This is Listen and Be Heard Radio, WLBH.org. Welcome to the Audio Garden. Let's cultivate our collective wisdom, nurture creativity, and spread love. That really was a fascinating story that we listened to together here in the audio garden on the Listen and Be Heard Hour for writers and readers. My name is Martha Senator, and I was wondering, how do you feel after listening to that story? Life is so full of beauty and tragedy, and when we listen together, the story itself, I don't know, it's like the fire that we gather around sometimes when we tell stories. The story becomes the fire. And sometimes the heat feels good, and sometimes we want to toss something into the fire and watch it burn. Hearing it prompted me to pull out my very tattered copies of When God Was a Woman and also Ancient Mirrors of Womanhood, both by Merlin Stone, and dip back into our most ancient lore for inspiration and raw power that I get energized by from hearing about hearing these archetypal stories of power in the feminine form. I'm going to join Lesley-Ann now in conversation about where her inspiration comes from to do this kind of counter storytelling. And she's already in conversation with a group of her students who are gathered around and very interested in what she has to say. Let's listen.
So I was commissioned to write this for a harbor festival. So as I was telling it, I was actually at the Copenhagen harbor, in the same harbor that these slave ships would sail from. And the story is also a conversation I'm having with that water, which is all water, because all water is connected.
I was struck by the comparison. Well, first of all, I was surprised that you told the story of a little boy and becoming a man as opposed to the Little Mermaid, presumably, sacrificing herself for love as she became an adult, I guess you could say. But there was more to Anderson's version of that story, which was that she wanted a soul, a human soul.
Yeah.
So you've turned this around.
Yes.
Which I find very interesting because, of course, that was an argument for slavery, that these people did not have human souls. You want to do the counter story to Hans Christian Andersen's fantasy, I guess we could say. And if you looked at it as a fantasy, you could take apart those elements of it that are similar to how you talk about Linnaeus dividing, being a classifier in your book, Black Girl on Mars. In this situation, we have Hans Christian Andersen sort of projecting the whole capitalist, modern Western idea of life and even the soul, and how from that perspective that it's divorced from nature somehow.
Yeah, I mean, the Enlightenment came in European history when they were, dehumanizing Black and brown people and women as well. Whoever is saying that something is without a soul, I would say the person who's saying that something is without a soul is a thing that's without a soul. That's my argument at this point.
Right, and I think we could even extend that, beyond people to animals, to nature, to water.
Yes. Yeah.
And that we're more connected to those things than many of us want to recognize, really. But that is sort of a central theme in his story as well, and what people in America who have sort of digested the Disney version might not be aware of is that even though she sacrifices herself, she ultimately does get a soul in another way than by, winning the love of this prince that she ultimately fails to win. Because she's willing to sacrifice her sort of comfort to find that, the deeper meaning of what it means to have a soul. And I think that's the same thing that you're pointing to with this young man, that he realizes that, there is a price perhaps that we should not be willing to pay for this comfort and riches. Not perhaps, but that we have, paid that price and now we're living with it.
The story about his cursing God when he was young that is Søren Kierkegaard's father, actually. When I was doing research, there's a story about how he was a child and he was in great poverty and he cursed God. And then that would always haunt him as an adult. It was something that always came back. So I kind of merged these different stories that I came across reading about different characters. I looked at Kierkegaard, again, inspired by Jamaica Kincaid telling me on that day that Kierkegaard's family's wealth came from slaving, which it blows my mind.
He's an example of being soulless in the midst of trying to understand the soul.
Well, yeah, because how can you I just don't understand this, the exclusivity of European thought.
Can you expand on? I'm not sure I understand what you mean by the exclusivity of it.
So I have a thing for classic European literature and history. I do. I mean, I had to admit it to myself in the last few years. I love reading 16th, 17th, 18th century. It doesn't matter. History, it could be novels. I'm really into it. So I'm really into this. But they're definitely not speaking to me. I mean, I get it, but when they were when I wrote in Black Girl on Mars, Linnaeus wasn't picturing me when he's he wasn't thinking about this Black woman. So they're sitting there and they're coming up. And first of all, none of the stuff from the Enlightenment is original. It turns out that all of these ideas they stole. Particularly from various Native American cultures that they were coming across. So,
well, even the Constitution is based on a Cherokee.
Yeah.
Some of their, ideals and way that they did things.
Exactly. So they took this, these belief systems, et cetera, which was quite inclusive. And, in order to make the cut here on these shores, they made it very exclusive for only a certain class and white men.
As I've been learning from you about counter storytelling, I did not realize that it's actually a formal academic term that has been studied, and quite a lot has been contributed to just talking about that and developing those ideas.
Yeah. So, I mean, I just sort of take it, I practice it. I found out about counter storytelling many, many years ago. And just to name, it comes out again from critical race theory. But for me, these narratives that we get told that reimagine history, it's important for us to push back against these stories, to counter them. And in my case, because of my particular histories and identities, et cetera, it looks the way that I practice it, which I love. I mean, to me, it's I'm here in Europe. It's there's so many things. I'm just countering by my very existence. So I'm just having fun.
Well, it's good to have fun with it and not otherwise. I want to ask you, though, I don't think you told our listeners, how do you want to be found on social media? How can they get involved more with Bandit Queen Press and understanding where you're coming from?
Thank you. You can reach me through my website, which is www.banditqueenpress.com. You could also find me, I have another website, blackgirlonmars1word.com, and you can read more about my work. I'm no longer on social media. I am on Instagram. It's a private account. You can, if you send me a friend request, it will probably help if you send a message that you know me from my work and etc. And then I can add you. But I'm slowly weaning off of social media.
Well, I hope that you won't disappear from Listen and Be Heard. We're a nonprofit, non-commercial radio show, and now we're also a streaming radio station at WLBH.org. And I want to thank you so much for joining us in the audio garden, Lesley-Ann Brown. I have a feeling that it won't be the last time. I'm going to have to digest this story for a while. There was a lot in there for me and our listeners to think about. So thank you once again.
Thank you for inviting me.
I hope that you enjoyed listening to the story, hearing Lesley-Ann's thoughts about what she's doing. And you are welcome to contribute your audio or written thoughts about all that or anything else you've heard here in the audio garden by visiting listenandbeheard.net and filling out our contact form. My co-host here on the Listen and Be Heard Hour for writers and readers, Tony Robles, he gets invited to read a lot, and one of the latest places being the Juniper Bends Reading Series that happens at Flatiron Writers' Room in Asheville, North Carolina, and it's free. And this one took place on February 16th and was themed Love in All Its Forms. And featured were Kelly Kelbell, a prose writer, and also one of the most banned young adult authors, novelist Amy Reed, who we'll hear from both of them next week. But right now, we'll hear from the other two features. Our own Tony Robles reading from Thrift Store Metamorphoses, and another poem from Sebastian Matthews.
We drove into the snowstorm as if entering an alternate reality. The cinematic white shuttling us into a silver landscape of snow and ice. That hallelujah came on a few beats after. Jeff Buckley's opening breath, a puff of fog on the windshield, only added to the surprise. Whatever we were before, we were wide awake now. We shared a glance, not wanting to jinx it. I placed my hands firm but light on the wheel, worried that this was all too good, that too much joy, too all of a sudden, might just upend our lives and spill them down the mountainside. We were on the Blue Ridge Parkway, up on that snaking track winding slowly to the top of Mount Mitchell. There had not been a whiff of snow back in town. We had fallen silent a few switchbacks back. In Buckley's cover, there were quite a few drifting near silences, lightly strumming chords hanging in the air, drawn out syllables in choir boy falsetto morphing into tormented wails. I'd cracked the window. Allie's eyes were closed. She was taking it in through her pores. This was less than a year before our son entered our lives. We were still young, in love with our love. And it was before television and movies had laid Cohen's eerily lovely song all over their climactic scenes like syrup, ruining it for anything but hyperbole. I can remember the blue-black slick of road leading us through the snow-covered trees, shrunken and hunched by years of wind and the sound of the tires on wet asphalt. How Allie opened her eyes and stared down the valley on our right, her hand warm on my forearm. And how when we dropped low enough in altitude, the winter snow, as quickly as it appeared, vanished. This is called Thrift Store Phone Call.
Of course, you're not allowed to chat on the phone on thrift store company time. They keep count of your hours, seconds, down to the breaths. And the merchandise comes in at the donation area. A woman donated some items, beautiful pottery that belonged to her mother, who recently died. I handle the pottery gently, as if the potter's hands are my own. And in a box nearby, somebody has donated a tangle of trinkets, a small treasure trove of buttons, needles, thread, bottle caps, paper clips, etc. In the box also sits a rotary telephone, burgundy. It's the same kind my grandparents used to have. Their phone number was Skyline 1 3046. I look at the phone in the box, thinking of buttermints that Grandma and Grandpa had in a glass bowl. The phone starts to ring. I pick it up. Hello? How's my boy? A voice says. Grandpa, I say. Yeah, it's me. Hey, I heard you're working at a thrift store. Who told you, I ask. Hey, remember what I told you. Grandpa's got his eyes on you. I even know when you're using the laboratory. Good to hear your voice, Grandpa. You know, son, I always wanted you to be an athlete, like I was. You know, track, tennis, baseball. I know, Grandpa, but I do a lot of running at the thrift store, like a chicken with its head cut off. I'm running between housewares and hosiery so much that I'm practically a track star. It's nice to hear your voice, son. I gotta run, but remember, Grandpa's got his eyes on you. I hang up the phone, dust it off like the most important thing in the world. I put it in a safe place close by, knowing that Grandpa has his eyes on me.
Legislative authority that current iterations of the board are not legally permitted to bind future iterations of the board. And what I mean by that is, I think that this particular version of the City Council and the County Commission could vote to include a budgetary item for a reparations initiative, but they would have, I think, a very difficult time legally saying that next year or 5 years from now, that future city council is also bound by this.
I think the Black community, the indigenous communities, brown communities, I think folk will be fools to think that the elimination of the problem will lead automatically to the solution. And that's just not the case.
Water very naturally moves through a landscape in a certain pattern. And so food shed is an idea that we can think about food that way.
You just can't think of how many times a day you go to your water source, the tap in the kitchen or the bath, whatever it is, we take it for granted. And it's like gold in Hawaii and many, many cultures that live so close to their land and are so dependent on what Hawaii brings to you and how much it gives you and its abundance. And Hawaii did become it is a commodity all around the world. It's a global issue. It's a global value. And as a commodity, it means that people struggle to own it, to make it theirs, to control it. And a large crop like sugarcane, which came to Hawaii and became a huge catch crop and took over huge swathes of land since the late 19th century on. That land took over and, they diverted water sources, and it took away just the water sources that Hawaiians needed to grow their Hawaiian crops, their indigenous crops.
Even though I always was putting my voice in, like, I definitely felt pressure to have the answer and make it a one-size-fits-all thing. And then in the second edition of the Ethical Meat Handbook, I really changed on that and was like, look, we're all struggling with so many different and disparate, like, contexts.
Certain spaces will be protected and we'll invest in, and other spaces won't be. They'll be left out, and that's always been the case with the marshland area.
Another reason participation is so important is to, like, first of all, you have to be forgiving of yourself based on your context, and then choose the entry point that works best for you.
That was a grouping of clips from some different specials, 1 hour specials that I've done in collaboration with Laura Langnick and Meredith Lee here on the Listen and Be Heard Hour for readers and writers. My name is Martha Senator, and when we do those specials, the topic is resilience in the face of climate change, agricultural resilience, climate resilience, community resilience. It's something that we need to keep talking about and focusing on, I believe, and I do that with these two authors and experts on the subject. And I hope that you'll join us in these conversations, in thinking about these things with us and envisioning a bright and resilient future. I've been collaborating with Charlotte Picard on a new iteration of our website, and it's live now. And I hope you all appreciate it because we worked hard on it. And one thing you'll find is a master reading list of all the books that we mention on each show. So if we miss one, let us know, but do go check that out and give us a little feedback, hopefully positive feedback. And we also post in-depth follow-up to each episode on the website as well. And we just posted the unedited video interview of Meg Reed, which you heard over the last couple of previous episodes, and so you'll be able to find that there on episode 6. And this was episode 7, where you'll find pictures from the Juniper Bends Reading Series and information about our ongoing series about banning books and also climate resilience. And the next one of those specials is scheduled for April 10th, and Meredith Lee will be joining me live in the studio for that 1 hour special. Next week, we'll feature some spoken word from Amy Reed and Kelly Kell-Bell from the Juniper Reading Series. And we'll talk more about the journey to getting published, writing workshops, and we'll have a couple of surprises too. I want to especially thank DJ Jeannie Hopper this week for doing the excellent sound design behind Lesley-Ann's story. And she gets a lot of her material that she does her mixing magic on from Poddington Bear, and you'll find the full credits for all of that as well on the website. As always, I want to thank Davine Dial for introducing Listen and Be Heard to the broadcast airwaves at WPVM in Asheville, North Carolina. We're also heard on KCEI in Taos, New Mexico, WLBH.org in Greenville, South Carolina, and around the world. And thank you again to DJ Jeannie Hopper, who's my associate producer. J. Rodriguez Sierra provides background music and loops, and you can learn more about him at jrodriguezsierra.com. Jeremiah Cothran does editing for us and is now working on those videos for us as well. Yvette Murray is the voice in the banned books segment of our show. Tony Robles is a co-host and contributor. Living It is produced by DJ Jeannie Hopper and Sabina Wertman, featuring me, Martha Senator, and released on Liquid Sound Lounge Records. I want to thank you for listening and for the opportunity to be heard.
Shake it, moving it, shake it, creating it, loving it. Living it is loving it. Living it is sewing a coat, investing each stitch with magic, creating a unique design, putting it on and wearing it the rest of your life. Living it is knowing that what you see, what you hear is tangible. It's being a rock in the river and being the river too. It's hearing, you'll never be able to do that. Living it is knowing you will do it. It's speaking the unspoken. It's thinking the unthinkable. It's doing the unexpected. It's quitting before you get fired. Living it is giving it is having it is taking it is moving it, shaking it, creating it, loving it. Living it is loving it. Living it is loving a man you're not supposed to love. It's giving way to emotions, creating commotions, calling attention to yourself, and eye contact. Living it is learning from someone who can actually show you. It's cleaning your teacher's house or helping her to find one. It's never ever saying J-O-B. Living it is a one-way ticket and no solid plans. It's smoking a J in a smoke cafe in Amsterdam. It's saying the day is pretty in a strange new city. Living it is giving it is having it is taking it is moving it, shaking it, creating it, loving it. Living it is having nothing to lose and everything to gain. It's putting all of your charms and attributes, every single one of them, to good use. It's knowing the kindness of strangers and love for sale. Living it is knowing where to buy rice and beans in bulk.